Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live session with Outsized. We're very lucky to have Sheldon Burroughs with us today. But just first, I see we have a number of people who have joined. Thank you so much. And we'll probably just give a few minutes for some other people to join. But, and excuse me if I keep looking to the one side, I have all of the commentary on that side. So we want to make sure that we address all of the questions that come from you. But big welcome to you all from the Outsized family. It's wonderful to have you with us. And what we're addressing today and what we're going to tackle with Sheldon is a very important topic. It's around mental health with a specific focus on the freelance community. And so there's obviously general aspects to that, but there's some very particular stresses and strains that the freelance community goes through and has been going through over the last period. So we will be looking into all of that. Just in terms of format, I'm just going to do a quick introduction to Sheldon, and then he's going to do a presentation in a bit of a conversational format with me. We will monitor all of the questions that you are sending, so please do add your comments and questions, and we will get to them at the end of that. So we're leaving more than enough time so that Sheldon can engage with you on those questions. In terms of Sheldon, we're very lucky to have him. As I said, Sheldon is an industrial psychologist. He is from Pretoria. He hails from Pretoria. He studied there, so that's his most redeeming feature, is the fact that he studied at my alma mater at the University of Pretoria, and he's currently still living in there. What I like about Sheldon is his comment, and I think you'll see this if you do some research into him, that he's a believer in the infinite possibilities of all people. And so this is about his passion in helping us all find our higher levels of effectiveness, and that transcends all aspects, of which mental health is just one. He spent many years in human resources and organizational development, and now runs his own practice. Living in Pretoria, I presume he's also a Bull supporter, but Sheldon, you shouldn't answer that. That's a great thing. And he's also an expert in mindfulness, and that is something that we can potentially get to at the end if that is of interest. So just keep that in mind if you have any questions on that. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Sheldon in.
Great.
Sheldon, welcome. And thanks so much for joining us and joining the whole Outsized community. Maybe just, I don't know if I've missed anything. You can just give us a quick overlay of what you want to talk about today and why you agreed with us that this is such an important topic.
Great. Yes, thanks so much, Johann. It's a real privilege to be with all of you this afternoon. I am a Bull supporter, fortunately or unfortunately.
So am I. You're in good company.
Yes, look, I think today is a really, really important topic. Just reflecting on a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last while from a coaching perspective, from working with teams in trying to deal with team dynamics and effectiveness, some organizations that are kind of making the shift back to some kind of new normal. You definitely notice and realize that the mental health of the general population is something that is raising its head. There's a lot of challenges on that front, individuals as well as, I think, larger systems within organizations. So I think it's incredibly topical and something that we definitely need to be looking at in terms of how we manage it proactively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Sheldon, just to lay the scene a little bit. There's been a lot of talk around the Great Resignation, and that's kind of something that is being touted as something more to do with the developed markets and specific other markets like the US, where there's been mass resignation, and a lot of that down to burnout and mental health issues. Within that, obviously, freelancers, it's been an interesting time. For some, it's been great, and for others, it's been challenging. I think there's both the professional and the personal side of things. Is your experience of dealing with freelancers such that they have had some unique challenges, and is that something you're going to chat to us about today?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's been interesting to try to get a sense of what could be different, what are those challenges, how are they dealing with it. So part of what I did in preparing for the session today was put together a short little self-assessment on current mental health. So a number of the Outsized community took part. I also had my own community network in South Africa join and answer the little questionnaire as well. And it's really just meant to be a little bit of a dipstick. So I'm certainly going to share a little bit more about that today and explain what I think could be behind some of the unique challenges, and also try and speak to what I think should be part of each one of our action plans in moving towards maintaining that sense of mental well-being that I think we all really are seeking at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that. So thanks, Sheldon. As I think I said to you previously, when we talk about health in general, I think many of us feel like we would have the tools when it comes to physical health. You know which gyms you can go to, you know what exercise you can do. There are, and it's freely available, and there's no stigma around this thing. But when it comes to mental health, a lot of talk about it, but I'm not sure that many of us necessarily have all the tools at hand or know where to find them. So looking forward to that. But why don't I hand over to you, Sheldon, and then we can work through your presentation, and we look forward to that. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, Johann. Okay, I'm just trying to see. I've clicked on the slides. Maybe just a quick check with you, Johann. Can you see the first slide popping up?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's get to it then. So as Johann was mentioning, what we have on the agenda today is going to be just a quick little exploration around mental health, and just trying to understand a little bit more about the concept, and maybe just what's important from my perspective is just to separate mental illness from mental health, or what I like to refer to as mental well-being. Then a quick check on the current context. So where are we at the moment in terms of how we are dealing with mental health? How prevalent is it? What are some of the signs we need to be looking out for? I think, Johann, you mentioned this when we were kind of prepping, and also saying that we don't want to scare people and get everyone paranoid about kind of self-diagnosing their mental illnesses, but rather just understanding what are those signs and how you can be properly informed about what to look for. Then a little bit of a model of mental well-being. And I think why that's important is because the more research you do on this topic, the more you'll find that there's a heck of a lot that's been put into mental illness, diagnosing it, living with it, trying to overcome mental illness. But what I found is that there's not nearly enough in terms of what we should proactively be doing about maintaining our mental well-being, because you shouldn't be waiting until you're struggling with some kind of mental health disorder before you actually do something about it. I think that's going to be a big topic today. So that will move into maintaining mental health, which I'll spend a good chunk of time, because I think there are some specific things that for our community and people in the freelance and consulting world are important. So I've kind of tailored something on that. And then, as Johann mentioned, if we do have time, perhaps just one or two interesting things on some of the work I've been doing on the impact of mindfulness and leadership in the current working landscape. All right, and then if we can, to try and keep the questions till the end, Johann, obviously you jump in with comments and questions as we go. We'll have a bit of a discussion, but to make sure that we cover all of the topics, we'll try and keep the questions to the end. So please make note of those, and I would love to engage with everyone right at the end.
Will do. Thanks, Sheldon.
Okay, great. So what I'd like to start off with is just create or sketch a little bit of a scenario quickly, if you'll allow me. So imagine that you've woken up early in the morning, you've got your first pot of coffee boiling, and you're sitting at your desk, you're about to tackle a really important report that almost kept you awake last night or kept you from sleeping. And before you jump into the report, because you want to get it done and you want to dedicate your first 2 hours of productivity to the report, the thought crosses your mind to maybe check your emails quickly. Maybe something urgent has come in. Let me quickly check my emails. You open your emails, nothing urgent has come in, so cool, you can get back to your report, but all of a sudden you get a Facebook message and you quickly go and check, oh, it's a friend of mine from school. I wonder what that friend's up to. Let me just quickly have a look and see what's going on. You open the message, get onto Facebook, read the message. Fast forward 45 minutes later, the coffee buzz from your first cup has already subsided, and you somehow can't remember what you did for the last 14 minutes, but you find yourself watching videos of baby pandas. And this is the kind of thing that for me speaks a little bit to the relationship that we have with our mind. Now, in that time, you had planned to try and be productive, get some real work done, and use your sharpened, focused mind to do something important. But instead, your mind somehow manipulated you, and you went down this little rabbit hole of distractions, and ultimately wasted almost an hour of your morning that was supposed to set you up for success for the day, and now you're way behind the 8 ball. So what I want us to do as we go through the topic today, for each one of you, I mean, some of you have done the self-assessment that I spoke about, some of you haven't, but what I'd like you to do is just consider your relationship with your mind at the moment. Is it something that you are able to exercise proper control over? Does your mind sometimes get the better of you? And what state of health is that relationship in at the moment? All right, so as I mentioned, we want to explore the topic of mental health. And when we talk about mental health, there are really kind of two components that we need to separate out. The first one speaks to mental illness, and on the other side, we've got mental well-being. Now, I like to think of this as a little bit of a continuum, and I'll explain what I mean. So on the one side, you would have mental illness, and as you kind of progress on that continuum, somewhere in the middle is going to be a neutral space, right? So in that neutral space, you are neither suffering from mental illness, nor are you experiencing true mental well-being. Okay, so you're not sick, but you're also not necessarily thriving from a mental perspective. On the other end of the spectrum is where that mental well-being lies. It's a little bit like a satisfaction scale. You know, the absence of dissatisfaction does not equate to satisfaction. All right, you're kind of in that neutral territory. And the reason why this is important is because I think whereas, you that is sitting here today, that's dialing in, you might not necessarily be in that space of mental illness, but maybe you're more in that neutral space. And while that might be okay for now, what I would like to offer today is to make the case for implementing a plan of action that can move you closer towards that side of mental well-being, because that will keep the mental illness at bay, or at least to a large extent, but also put you in a position where your best version can show up every single day. And I think that's probably something for each one of us working independently that is such an important aspect as part of being successful in what we do. So mental illness, a combination of abnormal thoughts, perceptions, emotions, behavior, and relationships with others, and according to the World Health Organization, includes things like depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. There's a few others listed there as well. Mental well-being, on the other hand, is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And I think Sheldon, that speaks so beautifully to a lot of what all of us are trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Sheldon, if you don't mind, just so it strikes me that to go back to the physical well-being analogy again, that this is in your experience, is this something that many people are ignoring? I got up this morning, I was tired, I went for a cycle, and I did that because I want to look after my physical health, but I'm not sure I have the same dedication on the mental side of things. And I think part of it is perhaps the struggle of knowing when you're in trouble or where you are sitting on that continuum. You can look at yourself in the mirror and make a call on how fit you need to be, or just go out for a jog and see how easy it is or not. But on the mental side, not so easy.
It's so true, Johann, absolutely. in the work that I do, I find it's something that people ignore to a great extent. I mean, all of us are wearing some kind of device these days. You can check how many steps you've done, what your heart rate is like, those kinds of things. When it comes to mental health, there isn't an easy way to really check in with yourself. And I suppose to some extent that's partly what I was trying to achieve with the little self-report assessment that I put together. But it's definitely something that people ignore. I mean, the stats are quite alarming. On average, people wait something like 11 years before they take the right type of action and seek professional help. So they struggle through mental illness. And I think probably because of the stigma, because of not understanding what's actually happening to them, they don't realize until it's too late to actually start doing something about it. And I think just off the back of that, what I would even argue is when we are looking at a model of overall well-being and wholeness, for each one of us to kind of be in balance, you want your emotional, your physical, your financial, your career well-being to all be solid. But without sufficient mental well-being as the bedrock of all of those, I don't think it's going to be possible. In order for any of those to flourish, you have to have a good mental well-being. And on that continuum, I would argue that you have to be somewhere further than the neutral space, because that will set you up for success in all those other areas of your life.
Sheldon, is this a two-way street? I'm looking at this and I completely take your point about the mental well-being being important, but I'm looking here and I'm just thinking in terms of especially the last 2 years, the disruption that we've seen to the social aspect. Careers, if I think about careers, people, certainly some people have lost jobs, people have changed jobs, there's been a lot of disruption there. Their physical environment, work from home, no compartmentalization between where I go to work and where I go to relax with my family. So how much of that is then again impacting back into the mental well-being?
Absolutely, they're all connected. And I've seen this with so many people that I've been coaching over the last 2 years. They often come to me and say, I think I need a bit more balance in my life. And then often we'll do a little bit of an analysis of this kind of wheel of life. And then you just see the massive gaps where, there are feelings of isolation. So from a social perspective, they're not where they need to be. From a career perspective, there's not enough engagement, there's not enough support, there's not enough challenge and kind of burnout, overwhelm. That makes a big difference. And the way that we normally tackle this is to just start with one or two key aspects. Usually the mental well-being is one of them that we incorporate, because what you find is when you increase or improve one area, the rest already starts shifting a little bit and making positive gains. So it's one of those things where all of them are very much interrelated, and you've got to look at it holistically.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So in terms of current context, there really is a lot at the moment that you can have a look at in terms of facts and figures. I think the pandemic over the last 2 years has definitely prompted a lot of research around mental health, because there have been some clear indications that things are getting or have gotten worse. So I'm not going to go through all of them on the screen. You can kind of see them. From a South African perspective, quite interesting that roughly 1 in 3 people are likely to, at least on one occasion, suffer from mental illness in their life. In the UK, it's 1 in 4, so possibly a little bit better, but I mean, those numbers are a little bit scary. Then you look at things in South Africa from a youth perspective, where 9% of teenagers death as a result of suicide. Of those 9%, 90% are directly related to mental illness. On the work front, 67% of people globally have reported higher levels of stress since the COVID outbreak. In South Africa, interestingly, 56% of workers have taken sick leave, due to mental health illness. Only 46% of those have actually sought EAP assistance. And I think that's also something that you would find quite a lot, is that there's this prevalence, and it certainly has gotten worse. But what doesn't really seem to always be increasing, or at least proportionally, is the seeking help component. So there still appears to be some stigma around it, and people seem to be hesitant to take the right kind of steps that they need to be taking.
Yeah, Sheldon, I mean, those are some frightening statistics, I mean, for me, because I only have to look around at my circle of friends and my family, and to say, well, okay, whether it's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, that's certainly not the perception that I'm getting from those around me. I mean, and I think we just had a nice comment from Hani around, who said it was in Malaysia, it was 1 in 5 pre-pandemic, and it's 1 in 3 during the pandemic. So there you can see that shift. But you know, maybe you can just comment for us. I guess the one thing that I struggle with, and maybe that's a personal thing, but is we all feel stress, and stress is a natural part, I guess, of life and of the challenges that we face, and taking on difficult circumstances. And it's not, I mean, I guess that's then in the camp of mental health, right? Where it's how you cope with stress. It's, you can't avoid stress. We're trying to avoid the mental illness, right? But yeah, those are some very, very scary statistics, and it just feels like it's proof enough that it's not being spoken about.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, coming back to the point I think we made in the very beginning, it doesn't mean that having a challenging day or a challenging week where you feel like the pressure's on, I'm overwhelmed, that doesn't necessarily mean you're suddenly suffering from mental illness. I think, you know, we mustn't start becoming paranoid. You know, when you look at the American Psychiatric Association, how they define mental illness and how they look at the symptoms, I think the key word is persistent, right? Because we all struggle to sleep from time to time, or have experience a shift in emotion. Maybe, you know, some of us that are a lot more introverted might experience a little bit of withdrawal. I mean, you can see all of them on the screen there. But when it becomes really persistent, when that state of being becomes your norm, and it becomes difficult for you to break out of that problem concentrating, this feeling of total apathy, when you can't break out of that kind of feeling or that sensation, then I think it's probably a good clue that you may be suffering from a potential mental illness, and then to seek the right kind of help that you need. And I think to be, you know, for all of us as well, in terms of the responsibility we have for the communities that we serve, to also look out. I mean, because I'm an executive coach, I end up coaching a lot of people, and sometimes I do pick up some of these abnormal behaviors. And as much as I try and help from a coaching perspective, sometimes I do have to say to my coachees, I think there may be something else that you need, not just coaching, but perhaps some more professional help in that regard.
Sheldon, so, in your experience, given that a lot of your work is within corporates as well, right? So you've done a lot of work in HR and such. How important, and I'm trying to think here about safety nets, you know, people that you can talk to, that you can rely on, that you can that can even help you if you're going through some of this to deal with the stresses that are on you work-wise. How important is that net, and can you define for me which are the most important? We think about sort of family, and we think friends and work colleagues, and where I'm going with this is that obviously the freelancer community has a particular situation here, and that we are a community, but you don't sit with colleagues in the same way that you would if you're in a building pre-pandemic and even now. The ability to just lean on each other. These are, you know, the freelance community is fiercely independent, you know, usually very strong characters, very expert and such. And it strikes me that if they don't have the right safety net, this could be a problem.
Yeah, spot on, Johann. I think in that regard, we unfortunately are our own worst enemies. There's a lot to be said for that strong sense of independence, and that sort of courageous approach that you have to your work, and we can slay those dragons, so to speak. But there definitely is a tendency of isolating ourselves. We don't ask for help often enough. And here I'm not even referring to professional help. I literally mean I'm sitting with a client and they've given me something to work on, and I'd love to just get another pair of eyes on this. Well, then do that. Don't try and pretend to be somebody else and give yourself advice. Literally call somebody up in your network and get them involved. Try to collaborate as much as possible. I think in the next few slides, when we start having a look at some of that research that has come through, you'll definitely see a little bit of that trend picking up. So it will certainly be, it's one of the 6 C's that I've put into the model of what we should be incorporating into our action plans, because we don't do it enough. Some of us do it well, but there definitely is that tendency of isolating ourselves a little bit too much. Okay, so on that note, let's have a look at what the state is of freelancers and the self-employed. So this was a very interesting study that was recently done in the UK, looking at a pretty big group of freelancers and self-employed individuals, just trying to get a sense of what the level of mental health is at the moment. So these were some of the interesting statistics that came out of the study. So if you are a freelancer or a self-employed individual in the creative sector, you are 3 times more likely to experience mental health issues. 10% of freelancers reported mental health issues, so experiencing mental health issues within the last year, within that year of 2021. 32% reported increased levels of stress since the pandemic started. The rating of good mental health has dropped from 68%, which was prior to the pandemic, down to 39%. So quite a dramatic shift there. And then here's an interesting one as well, coming to something you touched on initially, Johann. 29% have reported lower job satisfaction during the pandemic. And just thinking about how many of us have kind of been forced behind a screen. A lot of our work would typically be done face-to-face with people, connecting and experiencing that energy, but most of it's been happening behind a screen. So there's certainly a bit of dissatisfaction that's crept in. And interestingly, 10% did not take any time off in the last year, 2021. Now that's a little bit alarming. And again, I think it speaks to what we mentioned up front, this sense of bravado of, taking on the challenge, rising to the occasion, not saying no to work, and unfortunately doing a bit of damage to yourself in turn. So let's have a look then in terms of what sits behind this. What are the reasons that these freelancers and self-employed were providing for this big change and for the drop in mental health?
Maybe just a side note, Sheldon, to everybody who's listening. I mean, you and I had a conversation around this. Actually finding statistics and information on what's been happening in the freelance community has been difficult. And so hence relying on stuff from the UK and such. And we can assume it's been similar in South Africa. I guess now we're moving into solution mode is what I'd like to get to, because certainly, and this is a plea to everybody out there, don't feel alone. You are part of the Outsized community. If you need to reach out and even just want to know, somebody else who's doing a similar type of job to you, you want to connect with them, we're very happy to do that kind of thing. So just an offer to you to speak up, to consider all of this. But certainly I think we're now getting to the crux of it, is what can we do about it?
Absolutely, Johann. I couldn't agree more. It's so true. It's incredibly tough to find relevant statistics on this. So this was a wonderful piece of work that IPSI did, which is a non-profit organization in the UK. And so important that we need these kinds of communities and networks. So 53% indicated that the main reason was finding work. In other words, it's difficult to find work. 50% indicated irregularity of income as the biggest issue or reason for the increase in mental health issues. 32% said it was because of blurring boundaries between work and home life. Again, probably just taking on too much. 29% said no access to statutory employment benefits. I suppose that's one of those that might be a little bit unique to the UK, but might be also just as relevant in some other countries. And then 28% said it's working long hours or on very tight deadlines, where sometimes it might be unrealistic expectations that they are dealing with. And for me, when I had a look at this, and I'm going to show the results of the little mental health self-report assessment as well in a few minutes. I'm going to definitely get to that because there's clear overlap. But the one thing that I picked up here, and I also picked this up in some conversations I had with individuals in my immediate network, is that one of the key differences between somebody that is freelancing or an independent worker and somebody that's permanently employed is you face a lot more uncertainty. And I think that's really what that 53% and that 50% are kind of speaking to, because there is only so much that is in your control. As Johann was saying, the stresses are going to be there. And I think that is, and because the economy, it doesn't matter which country you're in, the pandemic had a big impact on every economy in every country. And as a result of that, I think that there's been a big increase in uncertainty, which has played a big role here.
Yeah, Sheldon, this may come across as a bit of a plug for Outsized, but we do consider ourselves a purpose-driven organization, and there's a good reason why we get up every morning. Now, we can't solve all of these problems by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly in terms of helping our freelance community find work and find purposeful work, as you were talking about, work that they love doing, trying to reduce the irregularity of income and ensure that it's on fair terms and that it's, that it's something that they enjoy doing. We'll continue to work on that and to try and take it as far as possible with our community.
Great. I think everyone will be happy to hear that. All right. So as Johann mentioned, getting a little bit into solution mode. So I've put together a little bit of a mental well-being model. I mean, there are many variations of this and many kind of takes on it, but I think this one kind of comprises the basic components, I think, that are important when you talk about mental well-being. So remember, this is not just about avoiding mental illness and kind of being in that neutral space, but it's really about maximizing your mental well-being. And part of the reason why I wanted to focus on this as well is because the self-assessment that I put together is based on all 6 of these components. So just very quickly, it would talk to firstly ensuring that there's creative and critical thinking. So the ability to challenge the norm, keep your brain active. Remember, our brain is a muscle. If we don't use a muscle, it atrophies. So we've got to keep our brain strong. The next one, goal setting and time management. It's really important to take the time to reflect, think about what it is you want to achieve professionally and personally, write those down and work towards achieving goals. The next one, decision making. Such an important part of how we run our lives and interact with the world. Are we considering various alternatives? Are we applying our rational thinking? So are we able to kind of suppress that amygdala sitting at the back, which is that emotional driver of our brains, and rather engage the prefrontal cortex that helps us think clearly? Then obviously stress management, right? A massive, massive one. Are we able to deal with the stress of life and to cope effectively? Definitely going to touch on that one just now when I get to sharing the results. Self-esteem, our view of ourselves. Are we able to practice self-compassion, respect, avoid self-criticism, those kinds of things? And then lastly, learning and mental stimulation, continuous learning and avoiding boredom and making sure that we are creating new synapses in the brain on a continuous basis. So there's a quick little model for you. And what I've done then is I quickly want to take you through the self-assessment results. So again, the self-assessment, for those of you that did it or didn't do it, it was really just meant to be a little bit of a dipstick, to just get a sense of where are we at in terms of doing well or not doing so well in that model of mental well-being. And if anything, I hope that it would just get you thinking a little bit more about your own state of mental well-being and potentially some of the areas that might need a little bit more work. And then just now I'll get to that 6C model, which will give you some nice ideas about what you can be doing. Right, so in the South African context, and I'll get to the global one in a moment, the strongest components were very clearly learning and critical thinking. And for me, that kind of made sense from a face validity perspective, because I think for a lot of us, our work kind of forces us to always be learning, and we probably have to apply a lot of critical thinking in what we do on a daily basis. One of the key questions was, what are some of the techniques that you are finding helpful in terms of maintaining your mental well-being? And here, people mention things like exercise, so walking, yoga, that kind of thing, connecting with other peers. So again, exactly what you mentioned, Johann, the ability to have a network of people that are like-minded, that are experiencing the same kind of thing as you, that you can tap into and just feel like, there's somebody else that's going through the exact same thing as you. You're not alone. The third one, quality time with loved ones. I think a lot of people gain their strength from that. And very interesting, prayer came through quite a lot. And I think that certainly speaks to just how rough the last 2 years have actually been, and how many people have lost loved ones and gone through some traumatic experiences. So certainly making sense there. If we have a look at the ones that came out the worst, so the one area that needs the most amount of work from a South African perspective, interestingly, is self-esteem. So for some reason, the freelancers and consultants are not necessarily investing enough time in self-care, their view of themselves, maintaining certain levels of confidence, competence, etc. The second worst one, stress management. Our coping skills, our ability to deal with the stresses that life is throwing at us is not where it needs to be. And interestingly enough, the goal-setting one. And for me, the way that I would interpret that is, I think we almost have a tendency of prioritizing the goals of our client over the goals of ourselves and what our own goals are. So where, in terms of career concerns, what are the things that are driving some of the challenges that people are experiencing? And here we see some of the overlap in the UK. Finding or generating work opportunities, because that is tough. Growing my business, or investing in the growth of your business, is really difficult. And cash flow and income, which again, a lot of those are all built around uncertainty. And I mean, one of my sort of favorite gurus, Tony Robbins, motivational speaker and expert coach, he speaks about the 6 core human needs. In order for a human being to function effectively, there are 6 needs they have. The number one need is the need for certainty. And that's one thing that we're grappling with here, is that uncertainty that comes through.
Sheldon, you made a good point about time management. And I think when we've all been on the treadmill the last while, just especially in the freelance community, just trying to maximize billable hours and do as much work as possible to deal with some of these financial concerns, for instance, time management is something that can easily kind of slip away. I just wanted to make a comment to everybody who's listening to this in terms of the quality time that needs to be spent in terms of with others and with peers in particular. There was a comment made around that, right? And that is something that has actually come through strongly to Outsized, and we have set up a specific Outsized community, which if anybody is interested in, there will be a link that will be posted to this, and you can sign up to get exclusive access to the community platform. And then you'll be on a waiting list. It's going to be launched very soon, and that's going to be a great place for us to create this community where people can actually have that almost collegial atmosphere, corresponding with people who have similar problems, pairing up, finding people, having conversations, putting out there the issues that they have. It's also going to be at the first place where you hear of the latest job opportunities with Outsized. So that will hopefully deal with some of the opportunities that you're looking for. So please look out for that. And there, I see the link has been posted. So please go to that. One thing I did wonder is, in terms of the stress management side of things, Sheldon, how much of learning how to deal with stress is something that is internal, and how much of the coping mechanism do we get from the external side of things, and how that can help? If you can just make a quick comment, and then I'd love to get to the 6 C's.
Great. Excellent question. I think it's always a combination. More so internal, I like to believe, than external, because when you really look at it, I mean, number one step in any kind of stress management is remove the stressor, right? But there are so many of them that we absolutely cannot remove, which means our coping skills and our coping mechanisms have to be really sharp in order to be able to deal with those things that get thrown at us. So I'm not going to go into the detail of the Outsized results. It's very similar to what we saw in the South African context, which also again rings true with what we saw in that UK study. Kind of speaks for itself again. It's that uncertainty, and very similar in terms of the helpful techniques. A bit of exercise, quality time, and reading was something that came through, which was quite interesting. All right, so let's have a look at a little bit of a recipe for success, and something that you can consider when it comes to what next? Where do I go to from here now? So I realize, okay, I am struggling to cope a little bit. It is quite tough. What are the kinds of things that I should be looking at in terms of putting into an action plan? And these are in typical consultant style. I've come up with a 6C model. So quickly, they are connection, clarity, compassion, consistency, cat naps, and confidence. And you'll see the direct link between these and also what we've seen in the results of those assessments that everybody's been involved in. So let's start with a connection. And we've probably touched on this one quite a lot. But as we mentioned, we unfortunately do find ourselves in prolonged times of solitude. You know, you kind of put your head down and you're working hard on something, and it's often alone. So try and avoid that. Maintain quality connections with others. Make time to have those coffee chats with people in your peer groups. Even if it's 15, 20 minutes, join a network of similar-minded individuals, or create a network. And I think that's where Outsized is such a wonderful organization and can do so much. And collaborate wherever you can. Even if you're just asking somebody to cast their eyes over a report, a proposal, or whatever it is that you're busy with. So that's the first one. Make sure that you connect. The next one is around clarity. And clarity is maintaining the tool that is your mind. That is, after all, what we are bringing to the table, right? So we want to keep our mind clear and sharp. And we can do that by practicing things like regular mindfulness, including meditation, relaxation techniques. Something I teach all of my coachees is a little bit of coherence breathing, which is something you can do for 3 minutes once a day or a few times a day. You literally just breathe in for 5 or 6 seconds and breathe out for 5 or 6 seconds. So it's just slow, consistent breathing for about 3 minutes, and it literally brings your mind into a coherent state so that you can be sharp to address what's coming. And then another thing I think which really is helpful is journaling. And for those of you that are not keen on picking up a pen and putting pen to paper, why not speak your journaling? You know, record it into your phone or some other kind of device. One method that really works well is answer these 4 questions. What happened? How did it make me feel? Why did I feel that way? And what can I learn from this experience? I find that works really well because it focuses the journaling. A lot of people are daunted by the empty page. So keep those 4 questions in mind when you journal. That allows you to process things so that your mind does not continuously ruminate over a difficult conversation, a challenge that you experienced recently.
Sheldon, would you say that you find that that doing the journaling and keeping a track of what you're doing and how you're feeling would contribute to being more effective in time management. Because I'm just trying to think about procrastination as being one reason why you don't get to things, right? And when you're writing down, actually talking about your achievements and what has happened, it actually stares you right in the face what you have and haven't done.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great way to reflect, and you're also kind of cleaning your mind out a little bit, so that it's got less stuff to obsess over. Our minds, unfortunately, are wired that way. It wants to obsess over things, and that's where procrastination can get into it, avoidance, those kinds of things. So you want to kind of dump all the rubbish, and that's a really great way of doing it. And speaking of time management, I know we are a little bit tight on time. We're almost done. Compassion is another important one. I think a big part of what a lot of the recent research is showing is just how important empathy is, for leadership, for mental health, so many things. So try and be compassionate, obviously, towards yourself, but for other people as well. It reduces your own stress. So giving back to others through things like mentoring, coaching, etc. Because in lifting others, we lift ourselves as well. So remember that. Another one, consistency. I think the principle here is really around, you cannot eat 7 apples on a Sunday and expect to maintain your health. You need to eat 1 apple every single day. So you've got to make sure whatever you put into this plan, whether you are creating a morning routine for yourself, or whatever it is, make sure that it's something that you do on a daily basis. Even if you are just dedicating 5 minutes or 10 minutes to it, start small, but do things like have a morning routine that becomes a little bit of your anchor, where, if you incorporate meditation or yoga or some exercise. Something I do is 3 things to be grateful for every single day, and I actually write it down, because then it's something that's actually, I'm kind of confirming it. Affirmations are another great thing.
Sorry to interrupt. I saw somebody, as a leaving present when they left an employer, they had given somebody what they called a gratitude jar, and they'd actually been writing it for their boss and just saying these are all the reasons to be grateful. And the jar was stacked, and it was the thing that they appreciated the most. Both receiving that and the person who wrote it obviously got a lot from it as well.
That's a wonderful, wonderful idea. Absolutely. So there are those little things that you can come up with for yourself, to kind of be a little bit of that anchor. So make sure that you do that on a consistent basis. The next one, I came up with catnap because it starts with a C. Essentially, it comes down to get enough sleep. I think this is something that a lot of us are not doing enough of. The current research shows that 1 in 2 people are not getting enough sleep. And the latest research, more and more, is showing that a lack of sleep is a major contributor to big illnesses like Alzheimer's, dementia, and even some forms of cancer. So my advice, rest when your body tells you to. There was an interesting study in the Mediterranean where people used to have the siestas. They would, after lunch, close up shop, go and have a nap for 2 or 3 hours and come back. When they stopped doing that, the mortality rate in males increased by 65% because of heart conditions, just because of the fact that they weren't getting that sleep that they were getting previously. So make sure that you guys get enough sleep. Do not prioritize the deadline over the rest that you actually need. And then the last one, confidence. Acknowledge your accomplishments. Again, I think journaling is another great way of doing that. Take a moment once a week or once every few days and write down the things that you feel proud about. Whether they're big, whether they're small, it could be winning a contract. It might be just having a good conversation with somebody. Whatever it is, take the time to reflect on where you are doing well. Explore your strengths. I think that's another important thing about keeping ourselves sharp. I think at the end of the day, for me, I love the whole concept of defending the asset. And remember that you are the asset. You are what you are selling at the end of the day. And if the best version of your asset is not able to show up, then you're selling a sub-quality or subpar product. And that's really what we should be doing, is trying to make sure that the best version of ourselves can show up. And I think that's why mental well-being is such an important aspect to driving our own success.
It's an absolutely critical point, Sheldon. And obviously, when we're talking about our freelance community, this is what is being bought, the best version of you. And the best version of you is going to be the most attractive to potential employers out there.
Absolutely. All right. And then I know we actually are technically out of time, but just some helpful tools and books, because I think it's always nice to have some things that you can find some support in. Apps. I've also tried a lot of these. I've read these books. Calm, Insight Timer. I've got a few things on Insight Timer myself as well. So a little bit of a plug there. And I don't get paid for it, but it really is an awesome app for meditation, mindfulness, that kind of thing. Trello, Evernote, wonderful apps to help with organizing yourself, making sure that you prioritize and focus on the right things. And then goal setting with Brian Tracy. Brian Tracy is the goal setting guru. He's got an awesome app there. Habitica, another way of kind of gamifying some of the habits that you would like to cultivate. I think that's a really nice one. And then some of the books there you can have a look at for yourself, all of them kind of speaking to a few different topics. I think at the end of the day, it's not so much a case of one size fits all. Each one of us has our own unique needs, strengths, development areas that are quite different. But I think if anything, what I'd like to leave you with today is that this cannot be something that you put on the back burner. Do not sit back and wait for signs of mental illness to present themselves before you start taking action. There are so many.
If I could, sorry, just because we've had a question now on this specifically, and you said don't ignore the signs. Hannah's asked us, how or when do you know when you're in trouble with your mental health? What are the signs?
Okay. So look, I mean, we can go back to some of those that were on the presentation. And I think there are a few more, but these are the ones that specifically a psychologist or a psychiatrist would be looking out for in terms of trying to determine whether or not somebody does need some professional help. And again, it's about experiencing these things on a persistent basis. In other words, almost on a daily basis, you have depressed feelings. On a daily basis, you just find this unusual drop in your performance at work, or if it's your studies or whatever the case is. A feeling of being disconnected from people, almost a sense of unreality. So I suppose some of it can be a little bit difficult to put your finger on. But for me, I think the difference is, can you bring yourself out of that state? Because I think it's okay to experience these things from time to time. But if you're experiencing them on a regular basis, then it's time to go and speak to somebody and see how they can help you.
Thanks.
Okay. I'm just trying to, is there are there other questions that are popping up? I'm just wondering if I'm not seeing.
We do have another question, and I mean, but it harks back. Do you mind now us dealing with some of the questions that have been, that you've spoken about, some of the areas that you've spoken about? Are you happy to move on to the question now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So Hani asked the question, said, would it be interesting to see whether there's a relationship between the weakness component of goal setting and business growth? In other words, if the business is already sustainable, would goal setting be a challenge? I think there's almost two questions here. The one is, how important is goal setting for a sustainable business? And then obviously we've been through a patch where potentially business has not felt sustainable, and therefore goal setting, that's the reason for that showing up as a weakness component.
Yeah, very good question, Hani. And it was interesting for me. I didn't expect that particular component to rate so poorly, because my, I suppose, false assumption was that freelancers, consultants probably spend a lot of time focusing on, okay, what are my goals? How am I going to achieve them? Am I working towards them, etc.? And one of the questions that I posed in the self-report that came through the lowest was the question around, or at least the statement, which was something around, I write down my goals, my professional and personal goals, and monitor my progress towards achieving them. It was rated very low. So in other words, very few people were actually putting a lot of effort into that. And what's interesting, especially if you read the work of Brian Tracy, who's kind of the guru and has been for decades now on goal setting, there's so much research that has proven that people who write down their goals are something crazy, like 90% more likely to achieve those goals by the sheer act of just writing them down. So there's something that happens in your brain when you actually write them down and you can see those goals. They almost start becoming a little bit tangible. Our brains are wired in a way that if you give your brain a problem to solve, it's going to try its best to solve that problem. And I think there's a little bit to that. So certainly, if you are not at this stage putting enough effort into your own goals, and by that I mean, take that well-being model that we spoke about and ask yourself, of all of these areas of my life, how am I doing at the moment? From a financial perspective, what is the one or two things I want to achieve in this year? From a social perspective, the one or two things: spiritual, career, physical, mental. Just start with that. It doesn't have to be anything massive, but just something small, and just try and get some progress towards achieving those. And I think you'll find that will have a massive impact in also how you drive your career goals, because I think that would obviously be a very big part for all of us.
Yeah. Sheldon, maybe just two comments. I mean, the first is just a kind of personal tip from my side. Apart from writing down those goals and commitments, is It's one thing to write it down for yourself, but when you write it down and you make it known to others, be it a spouse, a friend, a colleague, that has been shown to have dramatic improvements or have a dramatic impact in your ability or people's ability to actually meet those goals. The fact that you made a promise not only to yourself but to somebody else means you're that much more likely to do it. So that's also just a useful thing to remember. But it just struck me that in terms of the SNAP survey that you did and some of the feedback that we got, that we make a lot of assumptions about what's going on in the freelance community and what we would have expected versus what actually turned out. And I mean, this is by no means an extensive survey like you demonstrated from the UK and such, but it's just it gives us a hint that not everything is well and should be addressed. It also that there are unique challenges here and that there's much that we can learn. And so again, I would say to anybody who's interested, please join our community or put yourself on the waiting list for that. That's going to be a wonderful space for us to get to know each other. There's no commitment there. It's not that we expect anything of you. There's no cost to you. It's really just a space where we know that freelancers need that kind of community so that they can interact with each other. Sheldon, we are way overdue in terms of this time. And so big thanks to everybody who's still hanging on. Maybe just a final comment, because I know it was something that some people were interested in, mindfulness. If you can maybe just give us a few bullets on that, because it's one of these terms that gets bandied about. It sounds very kind of new age to some. Some people might think it's fluffy, and then other people, believe that there's massive benefits to us. So maybe just give us your opinion on that and where people can go for some resources and tools to help them with that.
Okay, great. Absolutely. Thanks, Johann. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I was challenged with that exact same question. And some of the work that I did was to basically say, well, if we look at it in the workplace perspective, let's have a look at it in terms of leadership. There's a lot of research, a lot of frameworks and models on leadership, and in mindfulness, also a little bit there. So what I did is I took servant leadership, which still today, or shall I rather say, especially with the pandemic happening, is even more relevant now than it was a number of decades ago when it first became prevalent. So I took servant leadership, and from a mindfulness perspective, I took mindfulness-based stress reduction, because it's a program that was started back in 1969 already by John Kabat-Zinn. And there's a lot of research, more medically, around the impact of mindfulness-based stress reduction. So a program, a very detailed, specific program that helps people to manage their stress. And it's been coupled with cancer patients, people going through other big trauma events, and it's made a huge impact in how they deal with those kinds of things. So for me, it was about, can we marry the two? Because if you look at servant leadership, there are very specific competencies that need to come through for somebody that is practicing servant leadership. Things like listening, empathy, persuasion, foresight, etc. So what I did is I took that particular model, married it then with the 9 pillars of MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which specifically cultivates characteristics like non-judging, patience, beginner's mind, trust, etc. And in a little bit of the research I did was to find a little bit of an overlap to see, could it actually have an impact? And what was quite interesting is that some of the research has already shown that leaders who present higher levels of mindfulness than other leaders that don't are rated as better leaders by their subordinates. So there definitely is a clear correlation between displaying mindfulness and actually showing up as a better leader. And patience is one example. So cultivating patience is something that mindfulness does. And it's really about, practicing mindfulness gives one the chance to give time and space to one's own unfolding, and a sense of peace is created where you become more able to reevaluate your relationship with the disturbances of the present moment. That's very touchy-feely. Can that have an impact on a leader? It certainly can, because from a leadership perspective, it will help a leader be more empathic. And we've already spoken about how important that compassion aspect is. So understanding others and empathizing with them. From a healing perspective, a servant leader is somebody that cultivates healing for subordinates, the ability to create healing opportunities for others. It definitely cultivates foresight, which is another leadership competency there, allowing the planned future to emerge. And then persuasion is another way, shifting away from positional power and rather having that sense of the ability to influence others. So I think that there's a lot of great work happening on the mindfulness front, especially in the workplace. And a lot of these programs that typically would have had a place in the medical field, you certainly see popping up in the workplace and becoming a lot more relevant in the workplace. So I think it's something that we need to do for ourselves.
Chime in here. I can understand it from a workplace context, but if we can just perhaps zoom out again and look specifically at our freelance community.
Yes.
I know it's something that's been said, but and people may not have read it that way, but we are all leaders in some respect of our lives and in different contexts. So I understand what you're saying in terms of a kind of a hierarchical structure, but as people who are leaders of themselves, is this just as applicable?
Absolutely, even more so. Just going back to those qualities of mindfulness-based stress reduction, these are the kind of things that get cultivated from having a mindfulness practice. And I mean, meditation is just one aspect of that. Increasing your levels of trust, kindness for yourself, for those around you, a certain level of acceptance, which I think plays such a key role in stress management, because we spend so much of our time in denial or kind of resisting the stress and the stressful situation that presents itself, instead of a certain level of acceptance that allows us to actually deal with it in a rational way. Curiosity, thinking differently about things, looking at a situation from different perspectives. Beginner's mind, coming to something with this mindset of learning anew. Learning is all about relearning and unlearning in today's world. And mindfulness allows us to cultivate those kinds of things. So there's a tremendous amount of benefit to it. And I would absolutely suggest that every person has to have some kind of a mindfulness practice as part of that anchoring action plan that I spoke about. And again, just coming back to those resources, there are many books. Wherever you go, There You Are is an awesome book, especially if you just want to start out. It's full of tiny little chapters that teach you something. There's practical stuff in there. The apps, I think Calm, Insight Timer, those two alone will give you plenty to work with. Whether you're a beginner, whether you're somebody that's advanced, just start with it. Start experiencing a little bit, play around with it. I guarantee that, give it time. It's not going to change overnight, but you definitely will see the benefit.
Sheldon, thanks so much for joining us and for being present with us. You've been very kind in sharing all of your time and expertise with us. Are there any kind of parting shots you'd like to leave for this community?
Well, I think, those of you that were here today, just to thank you for your time and the opportunity of being with you and sharing a little bit of my own experience. I always say to people that we learn from each other. We learn together. It's not me telling you exactly what you need to be doing, but it's more just sharing a little bit of my own experience. I would love to connect more on the Outsized community. I think it's a wonderful platform. This is exactly what we need. We need to be doing more of this kind of thing. So please make use of it and reach out if you have questions or anything else that you'd like to follow up on. Let's keep the larger conversation going.
Will do. And just from everybody at Outsized, thank you so much to everybody who's joined us today, who's taken part. This is a series. We will do more of these, and we look forward to having you join us. If you have any suggestions on what you would like us to do, please reach out. If you'd like to connect with Sheldon, you can do so, also through us. And of course, if there are any further follow-up comments, just let us know. We're only too happy to help you out. But once again, thanks again for taking time out and for extending the time that you expected to spend with us. Sheldon, once again, a big thanks, and have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you so much, Johann. I appreciate the opportunity.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.